This part of this course will be all about state, the concept behind React's interactivity. As we've seen before, components may have an internal state. That state can be referenced in the template, and the view that is presented to the user is automatically updated if entries in the state change. In this code example, we see a component with 3 separate state entries. We can use the state hook to declare any number of entries in the state. Let's take a look at how the state hook works again. useState may be called inside the component function to declare state entries. It receives one parameter, the initial state, and it returns an array with 2 entries, the current state and the corresponding setter function. A component function, and thereby also its state hooks, will be called any time a component needs to be rendered or re-rendered. On the first render, a state hook will initialize the state through the parameter that's passed in. On subsequent renders, it will just ignore the parameter and use the already existing internal state. As a guideline, we should usually try to store the minimal state, meaning there should be no redundant data. Other data can then be computed based on the state. Here are some examples. When creating a slideshow, we would store the image ID. There's no need to store the image URL separately, because it can be derived from the image ID. In a to-do application, we might want to display the number of completed and incomplete to-dos. We wouldn't store that information separately either, as it can be derived from the array of to-dos. If our application contains an input field and we want to display its validity to the user, we don't have to store the validity separately, as it can be determined from the content of the input. This was a quick, deeper look into the basics of state in React. Now, based on that, I'd like to suggest some exercises. The first one would be trying to reproduce the slideshow component we saw in the first part of this video series. And second, trying to extend the slideshow with some additional features. For the first part, you can see a summary of the tasks on the current screen. For implementing it, you could create a new component in a code sandbox. For the second part, try to add some features to the slideshow component. Here are some ideas of what you could be implementing. You can also come up with your own ideas. But avoid the functionality listed at the bottom. We will see how to do these in the future. If you have problems, don't hesitate to ask for help in the comments. If you have come up with a solution, share it in the comments.